Good evening, and welcome to The Sleepy Biographer. We're drifting through the quiet story of a life that changed the world. A mind that shaped politics, philosophy, and the very way we understand power itself. You've got nothing to do but rest. Tonight we aren't simply learning about a political thinker. We're walking beside him, through Renaissance Florence, through the courts of kings and the quiet corners of exile, through triumph and despair, through a life lived in pursuit of understanding how power truly works. Niccolò Machiavelli was not just a philosopher. He was a diplomat, a playwright, a poet, and a man who loved his city with a fierce and abiding passion. He believed that politics could be understood through careful observation, that history held lessons for those willing to learn, and that the world was not as it should be, but as it is. Some of what you hear tonight may surprise you. Some may spark a question or a memory, but mostly I hope it helps you drift gently into sleep, cradled by the rhythm of a life lived in pursuit of truth, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might be. And just before we begin, if these calm, curious explorations help you unwind or give you a quiet way to end your day, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. Now, let's begin. The year is 1527, and somewhere in the hills just south of Florence, in a small farmhouse that smells of cypress and old paper, a man is lying in his bed, listening to the sounds of the city he has loved and lost and loved again, drifting faintly on the warm summer air. His name is Niccolò Machiavelli. He is 58 years old, and in a few quiet hours, on the 21st of June, he will be gone. Let that number settle softly on you for a moment. 58. Not old by our standards, but worn. Worn in the way that only a man of relentless mental work and deep political disappointment can be worn. His body aches with what we now believe was peritonitis, an inflammation spreading quietly, fatally, beneath his ribs. But his mind, even now, is restless, turning, still thinking, still watching, still trying to understand. The room around him is modest. This was never a wealthy man. The walls are plain plaster, the light from a single oil lamp. There are books here, of course. There are always books. Livy's histories of Rome, some Cicero, a few of his own manuscripts, handwritten, some published, some never quite finished. The prince is already famous, or rather, it is already infamous, already whispered about in corridors of power across Europe, already being quietly slipped under cloaks by men who would publicly deny ever reading it. His wife, Marietta, is near. She has always been near, even when he was not. They were married young and stayed married long, through the years of his brilliant career, through the disaster of his fall, through the long, empty years of exile in the countryside when he had nothing left to offer Florence but words. She has borne him 5 children, given him a home even when the home felt like a cage, and remained steady through all of it, in the way that only the people we most take for granted ever manage to be. His friends have come and gone today. Some of them are weeping. Some are trying not to. Francesco Guicciardini, his great friend and perhaps the only man who truly matched his intellect, has sent word. They have argued and laughed and disagreed magnificently across decades of letters, the two of them. And now the letters will stop. Guicciardini will outlive him. and will grieve him more than he will ever admit. The city beyond the walls is in chaos. The Medici have just been expelled. Again, the republic that Machiavelli spent his entire career serving, then lost, then dreamed of restoring, is flickering back to life. And this time, he will not live to serve it. The cruelest timing of history. The thing he wanted most, arriving just as he is leaving. He is said to have told his friends a joke near the very end. A joke about a dream he had, in which two groups appeared to him. A ragged, wretched crowd, whom he recognized as the blessed souls of paradise, and a dignified, serious company of great men, deep in philosophical discussion, whom he recognized as the damned. And when asked which company he would prefer to join, he chose the second. He would rather spend eternity discussing politics with Plato and Plutarch than sit in pious idleness among the saved. Quintessentially Machiavelli, still funny, still irreverent, still himself, right to the end. And as the night deepens around him, and the lamp flickers, and the city murmurs somewhere beyond the hills, let us leave him here for a moment. Let us go back, all the way back, to where it began. Let yourself drift now. The light is changing. The year is pulling itself backward, rolling gently through the decades like a tide going out. We are moving through time, not with urgency, but with ease, the way memories come when you are almost asleep, soft and luminous, and just slightly out of reach. We arrive in Florence. Florence in the year 1469 is the most dazzling city in the Christian world. Not the most powerful, not the richest in territory, but the most alive, the most burning, the most crackling with human brilliance. It is the city of Botticelli, of Leonardo da Vinci, who is only 17 and already extraordinary, of Lorenzo de' Medici, who will soon inherit not just a banking dynasty, but something closer to a court of artists and philosophers and thinkers who gather by candlelight to argue about the nature of beauty and the soul. It is into this city, on the 3rd of May, 1469, that Niccolò Machiavelli is born. His family is respectable but not wealthy. His father, Bernardo, is a lawyer, or something like a lawyer, a man learned in Roman law, deeply bookish, who keeps meticulous household accounts with a kind of tender precision that tells you everything about a certain kind of Florentine man. Bernardo's accounts survive to this day, and they are extraordinary in their ordinariness. He writes down how much he paid for wine, how much for a pair of shoes, how many times his children fell ill, how much it cost to have a book copied. He is not a man of power. He is a man of culture, living carefully at the edges of power, doing his best to give his son something better than he had. Niccolò's mother, Bartolomea, writes poetry. This matters. A mother who writes poetry, in 15th century Florence, gives her son two things: a love of language and a sense that the interior life, the life of words and images and feeling, is worth attending to. Machiavelli will write all his life, not just political treatises, but comedies, carnival songs, poems, and letters of such brilliant and irreverent humor that even today, 500 years later, you can hear his voice in them, alive and sharp and utterly his own. The Florence that young Niccolò grows up in is a city of contrasts that would stagger anyone used to thinking of the Renaissance as a period of serene artistic achievement. Yes, there is beauty everywhere, The Duomo with its great orange dome rising above the rooftops, the Arno glinting in the afternoon light, the streets full of merchants and artisans and scholars and monks. But there is also brutality. There are public hangings. There are plague years that empty entire neighborhoods. There are vendettas settled in alleyways. There is the ever-present tension between the ruling Medici family and everyone who resents them, which is nearly everyone, depending on the season and the year. The Medici are not kings. They have never called themselves kings. They are officially just another wealthy family of Florentine citizens. But Lorenzo de' Medici, who becomes the effective ruler of Florence in 1469, the very year Niccolò is born, is something more complicated than a king. He is a patron, a poet, a politician, and a ruthless operator all at once. And the tension between those roles will fascinate the young Machiavelli for the rest of his life. Picture the boy, then. Niccolò is small, we think, dark-haired, quick-eyed. He reads voraciously. His father makes sure of this. Bernardo borrows Latin texts for him, pays a tutor for him out of careful savings, brings him along when he goes to speak with learned men about legal matters. The young Niccolò absorbs everything. He learns Latin. He reads Cicero and Livy with something close to rapture. He develops very early what will become one of his most distinctive intellectual habits, the habit of looking at history not as a collection of edifying stories, but as a laboratory, a place where you can study how human beings actually behave when power is at stake. He is not a saint. There is no evidence of unusual piety, no mystical experiences, no early signs of moral greatness in the conventional sense. He is, by all accounts, funny, clever, irresponsible with money, fond of women, fond of conversation, and deeply, almost obsessively, interested in the question of how the world actually works, as opposed to how it is supposed to work. He is, in other words, already himself. Let your eyes grow heavy now. The story is still moving, still unfolding, but gently, like pages turning in a warm room. Niccolò grows up in a city that is, for most of his childhood, presided over by one of the most extraordinary men of the age, Lorenzo de' Medici. Lorenzo the Magnificent, as he will come to be called, is simultaneously everything Machiavelli will later write about, and everything Machiavelli will spend his career trying to understand. Lorenzo is charming, brilliant, politically gifted in the extreme, and capable of genuine cruelty when necessary. He is also a genuine poet, a genuine patron of the arts, a man who believes that beauty and power are not opposites but companions. He bankrolls Botticelli. He nurtures Michelangelo. He fills his villa at Careggi with the most brilliant minds in Italy and hosts philosophical discussions that go on until dawn. He is in many ways exactly the kind of prince that Machiavelli will later write about, not a paragon of virtue, but something more useful and more durable, a man who understands the nature of power and uses it wisely. But Lorenzo is also mortal, and the city he holds together so skillfully is, beneath its glittering surface, a thing of extraordinary fragility. When Niccolò is 9 years old, something happens that will shape the city's political imagination for a generation. The Pazzi Conspiracy. April 26, 1478. During High Mass at the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, in the most sacred, most public, most impossible of spaces, Assassins hired by the rival Pazzi family attack Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano. Giuliano is stabbed 19 times and dies on the floor of the cathedral. Lorenzo is wounded but escapes, drawing his sword and backing into the sacristy while his friends hold the doors against the attackers. The aftermath is swift and savage. Lorenzo has his enemies hunted down, tortured, and executed. Their bodies are displayed publicly from windows of buildings. The Pazzi family is destroyed. Lorenzo emerges from the crisis with his grip on power, if anything, tighter than before. A 9-year-old boy growing up in Florence hears about all of this. He hears adults talk. He sees the aftermath in the streets. He takes in, at an age when the mind is like clay, the lesson that power is fragile, that enemies are real, and that the rules of ordinary morality sometimes have to give way to the logic of survival. These are lessons he will spend the rest of his life trying to understand and articulate. He is 17 when Lorenzo the Magnificent dies. He is 25 when the next catastrophe strikes. Charles VIII of France invades Italy, and the Medici, in a spectacular failure of political nerve, are expelled from Florence. For the first time in Niccolò's living memory, Florence is a republic again. He will be 30 before he finds his place in that republic. But when he does, it will change everything. There is something deeply satisfying about a person who finds the work they were born to do. Not everyone gets that. Many people spend their lives working at things that are perfectly adequate, but not quite right, not quite lit from within. But occasionally, rarely, a person steps into a role that feels less like employment and more like a calling, a place where everything they are, everything they have read and thought and observed and argued, suddenly has somewhere to go. For Niccolò Machiavelli, that moment comes in 1498, when he is 29 years old. The Florentine Republic, freshly restored after the expulsion of the Medici, needs to staff its governmental offices. Florence at this time is organized around a complex system of councils and committees, offices and positions, all of them rotating, all of them theoretically subject to popular will, none of them particularly easy to navigate. The Chancery, the administrative heart of the Republic, responsible for correspondence, diplomacy, and the management of the Republic's external affairs, needs a new secretary for its second branch. Niccolò Machiavelli applies. He is appointed. And suddenly, at 29, he has a purpose. The appointment is, on paper, modest. He is a secretary. He drafts letters. He manages correspondence. He is not, technically, a great man of the Republic. He does not make policy. He does not sit on the councils that decide Florence's fate. But almost immediately, he begins to do something that transforms a modest bureaucratic role into something extraordinary. He pays attention. His superiors notice. The Republic's leading men begin to rely on him, not just for the drafting of letters, but for something harder to define, for his judgment, his ability to read situations, his gift for cutting through the noise of political events and identifying what actually matters. Within a few months, he is being sent on diplomatic missions, first small ones, to nearby towns and minor courts, then larger ones, then very large ones indeed. Picture him now, young, intense, quick, with dark eyes that miss nothing. He arrives at a court and immediately begins to assess, not just the stated positions of the people he is negotiating with, but their personalities, their fears, their ambitions, the gap between what they say and what they actually want. He writes his reports with extraordinary clarity and insight, and the men back in Florence who read them find themselves understanding situations they had found opaque before. This man can see things. He is also, by all accounts, somewhat difficult at courts. Not in a rude way, but in the way of a man who is not terribly impressed by ceremony and is almost constitutionally incapable of flattery for its own sake. He has a dry, slightly cutting wit. He is not afraid to say things that are uncomfortable. He once wrote a report from the court of Louis XII of France, in which he noted that the French court was run by an extraordinary number of men who were, in his estimation, utterly incapable of thinking clearly. This was not perhaps the most diplomatic observation a diplomat could make, but it was accurate. It is in this period, in his 30s, during the years of his active diplomatic work, that Machiavelli meets the man who will haunt his intellectual imagination for the rest of his life. His name is Cesare Borgia. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a figure who is equal parts magnificent and terrifying. A man who is intelligent, beautiful, utterly without scruple, and ferociously effective at getting exactly what he wants. A man who seems to have been born without the normal human hesitations, without the instinct to flinch, to hold back, to worry about consequences. This is Cesare Borgia, the son of Pope Alexander VI, a cardinal who abandoned his robes to become a warlord, a conqueror of central Italian territories who moved with such speed and strategic brilliance that even his enemies could barely keep up with him. A man who once, in a single night, had several of his own commanders strangled when he discovered they had been plotting against him, then hosted a lavish dinner for the rest to show that everything was perfectly fine. Machiavelli encountered Borgia in 1502 during a diplomatic mission to his court at Imola. He was there for months, and what he witnessed in those months, Borgia's methods, Borgia's logic, Borgia's terrifying clarity about the nature of power, lodged itself permanently in his mind. You have to understand what Machiavelli saw. He saw a man who had taken a chaotic collection of Italian territories and imposed order on them with ruthless efficiency. He saw a man who understood that fear and love are both tools, and who used them with the cold precision of a craftsman. He saw a man who had done something that Italian politics in this period very rarely managed. He had been effective. He had done the thing he set out to do. He had built something real. Borgia's most famous act, the one Machiavelli would later describe in The Prince with barely concealed admiration, was the massacre at Senigallia. Borgia had employed a group of mercenary commanders, the Orsini and Vitelli families, who had been conspiring against him. He knew they were conspiring. Rather than confront them openly or simply dismiss them, he invited them to a meeting at Senigallia under the pretense of reconciliation. They came. They were welcomed warmly. And then, in a single swift operation that Machiavelli later called a masterpiece of dissimulation, they were all seized and strangled. Brutal, unquestionably, but also, in the logic of its time and place, coldly rational. Borgia had identified a genuine threat to his rule and eliminated it with surgical precision and no unnecessary collateral damage. He had done what needed to be done. This is the thing that people most often misunderstand about Machiavelli's admiration for Borgia. It is not moral admiration. Machiavelli is not saying that this was a good or virtuous thing to do. He is saying something both simpler and more disturbing. It worked. And understanding why it worked, understanding the logic of power, underneath the moral surface of events, is the essential political task. Machiavelli watches Borgia. He takes notes. He sends his reports back to Florence. He is electrified and disturbed in equal measure. He has found, in this terrifying man, a kind of living laboratory, a test case for all the questions he has been turning over in his mind since he read Livy as a boy. How does power work? Really? What keeps a ruler in power, and what topples him? What is the relationship between virtue and effectiveness, between morality and success? He does not have the answers yet. Those will take another decade, and a catastrophe, to find. But the questions are crystallizing. Something is forming in the mind of the Secretary of Florence that will eventually change the way the world thinks about power. Let the night grow a little quieter now. The great dramatic confrontations are resting for a moment. We are in the middle years, the working years, the years when Machiavelli is simply doing his job, and doing it magnificently. He is sent everywhere. He goes to the court of Louis XII of France, twice. He goes to the court of the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I, making the long, cold journey across the Alps in winter, arriving at a court that bewilders him with its formality and its apparent inability to make any decision faster than several months. He writes brilliant dispatches from all of these places, the legations as they are known, that are so sharp and insightful that they are still read by historians today as primary sources of the first importance. He also in these years has his greatest practical achievement, the creation of the Florentine citizen militia. This was Machiavelli's great practical obsession, and it grew directly from what he had observed in the field. Florence, like virtually every Italian state of the period, relied primarily on mercenary armies, soldiers for hire, often foreigners, who fought for whoever was paying them and whose loyalty was, at best, conditional. Machiavelli had seen, again and again, what this produced in practice: armies that were reluctant to actually fight, that changed sides when the money ran out, that had no genuine stake in the outcome of the battles they were supposed to be winning. The solution, he argued with great passion, was a citizen militia, a military force made up of Florentine citizens and the people of Florentine territories, men who were fighting for their own city, their own homes, their own families, men who had an actual stake in victory. This was not a new idea. It was, in fact, explicitly drawn from his reading of Roman history, from his understanding of why the Roman Republic had been so militarily effective. But it was deeply unfashionable, and in the context of Renaissance Italy, it was genuinely radical. Against considerable resistance, Machiavelli pushed the idea through. The militia was established. He helped recruit and organize it. He took enormous pride in it. It was, for him, one of the few moments in his career when his ideas translated directly into practical reality, when something he had thought and argued for actually came into being in the world. The militia would, in the end, fail. Not immediately, not ignominiously, but it would fail. And its failure would be part of what destroyed Machiavelli's career. But the idea behind it, the conviction that a state must be able to rely on the genuine loyalty and investment of its own people rather than on purchased force, is one that runs through everything he would later write. In these years, he also begins to write more personally, more freely. His official correspondence is extraordinary, but alongside it, he is developing a voice that is all his own, comic, irreverent, deeply earthy, quick with an obscene joke and even quicker with an insight. His letters to his friend Francesco Vettori, written later in exile, are among the great informal prose documents of the Renaissance. Funny, sad, honest, alive in every line. He falls in love, more than once, probably. There is a famous letter he wrote in 1514 to Vettori, describing a passionate entanglement with a singer or courtesan, who he refers to only as La Riccia, the curly-haired one. The letter is one of the most endearingly human things he ever wrote. The great political thinker, the author of The Prince, reduced to the condition of a besotted middle-aged man who cannot think clearly because of a woman who may or may not be worth the agony. He is happy in these years, as happy as he will ever be, perhaps. He has his work, he has his friends, he has Florence, he has the Republic he serves with genuine devotion, and he has the growing sense that he is beginning to understand something important about the world. Then everything falls apart. There are moments in a life that divide it cleanly in two: before and after, the moment before a death, a failure, a catastrophe, and the moment after. Everything is the same, and everything is different. For Machiavelli, that moment is 1512. In September of that year, a Spanish army acting on behalf of Pope Julius II, who desperately wanted the Medici restored to power in Florence, marches on the Florentine territory of Prato. The town is small, the garrison is thin, and critically, the defense relies in part on Machiavelli's citizen militia. The militia breaks, not completely, not shamefully, but it breaks. The Spanish troops, veterans of real campaigns, clash with the Florentine citizen soldiers, and the citizens, however willing in theory, are not soldiers in the professional sense, and they run. Prato is sacked. The sack is terrible. Pillage, rape, killing, the full medieval horror of what happens when a city's defenses fail. And the news of Prato shatters the political will of Florence. The Republic collapses, the Medici return, and Niccolò Machiavelli, secretary of the Florentine Republic for 14 years, is dismissed from his post. It happens very quickly. As these things always do, he is removed from office. He is banned from the government buildings he has worked in for over a decade. He is fined. He is confined to Florentine territory and forbidden to travel. Then it gets worse. In February 1513, a list is discovered. Names of men suspected of involvement in an anti-Medici conspiracy. Machiavelli's name appears on it, placed there by someone who wanted to implicate him, or perhaps simply because he was known as a man of the Republic. He is arrested. He is taken to the Bargello, the city's prison, and he is tortured. The torture used was the strappado. Let us not describe it in much detail, because we are here to rest. But it was brutal, and it was designed to produce confessions. And Machiavelli, to his eternal credit, did not confess. He was given the strappado, some accounts say 4 times, and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. He was innocent of the conspiracy. He was released a few weeks later. Ironically, not because he was exonerated, but because the new Pope Leo X was a Medici and had declared a general amnesty in celebration of his elevation. Machiavelli walked out of prison having been tortured and released, not through justice, but through accident. He was 44 years old. He had no job, no income, no official standing in the city he had served for 14 years. He was, in every practical sense, finished. So he went home. The farm at Sant'Andrea in Percusina, near the village of San Casciano, is about 7 miles south of Florence. It is a modest property. The house is plain. The land around it is the gentle Tuscan countryside, rolling hills, olive trees, vineyards, the particular light of afternoon that seems to have been designed to make you feel that the world is full of quiet beauty, even when your own circumstances are fairly grim. Machiavelli arrives here a broken man, in the most practical sense. He is politically disgraced. He is financially stretched. He is banned from the city where he spent his entire adult life. He is separated from the work that gave his days meaning and from the friends and colleagues who made that work feel worth doing. He is also, it turns out, about to write the most influential book on political power ever composed. His daily routine in these exile years is described in one of the most extraordinary personal letters in the history of Western literature. He wrote it to his friend Francesco Vettori in December of 1513. Let me tell you what it describes. He wakes early. He writes and walks in the woods on his small estate, checking the work of the woodcutters. He reads a little Dante, a little Petrarch. He goes to a nearby spring and sits there with his thoughts. At midday, he goes to the inn at the crossroads where the local tradesmen and labourers gather, a miller, a butcher, men of that sort, and plays cards and dice with them. He swears and argues and loses money. He eats with them. He is part of their ordinary world, the world of small transactions and local gossip and games of chance. But then, in the evening, he goes home. He changes his clothes. He takes off the rough working clothes of his daytime and puts on what he calls his regal and courtly garments. He goes into his study. He sits down at his desk. He picks up his pen, and for 4 hours, he is somewhere else entirely. He writes, "I enter the ancient courts of ancient men, where, received by them with affection, I feed on that food which only is mine and which I was born for, where I am not ashamed to speak with them and to ask them the reason for their actions. And they, out of their human kindness, answer me, and for 4 hours of time I do not feel boredom. I forget every trouble. I do not dread poverty. I am not frightened by death." This is one of the most beautiful descriptions of intellectual work ever written. The image of a man changing his clothes to enter the world of ideas as if he were entering a sacred space. The humility of it, asking the great men of antiquity for the reason for their actions, as if they might deign to answer. The peace of it, poverty forgotten, death not frightening, the hours dissolving into pure engagement. He is writing The Prince. The book that emerges from this extraordinary solitary labor is like no political text that has come before it. It is short. It is brutally direct. It throws out the entire tradition of advice to rulers literature that preceded it, the literature that counseled princes to be virtuous, pious, merciful, just, and replaces it with something that reads more like an operational manual than a moral treatise. Machiavelli is writing about power as it actually works, not as it should work, not as we wish it worked, as it works. A prince must know how to use force when necessary, He must know how to lie when lying serves the state. He must understand that cruelty, applied decisively and once, may be preferable to a protracted softness that produces greater suffering in the long run. He must be the lion and the fox, the lion to frighten the wolves, the fox to recognize the traps. He must appear merciful, faithful, humane, sincere, religious, but must have a mind so disposed that when it is needful to be otherwise, he knows how to change to the opposite. Generations of readers have flinched from these passages, have called the book immoral, cynical, a handbook for tyrants. And it is possible to read it that way. But it is also possible, and this is what Machiavelli himself always seemed to believe, to read it as an honest attempt to describe reality. A reality that is not always pretty, not always just, not always arranged so that virtue is rewarded and wickedness punished. A reality in which the truly difficult question is not what is the right thing to do, but how does one act effectively in a world that does not cooperate with good intentions. He dedicates the book to Lorenzo di Piero de' Medici, a grandson of Lorenzo the Magnificent, currently the most powerful Medici in Florence, in a dedication that is by turns obsequious and quietly proud. He hopes Lorenzo will read it and understand it. He hopes it will win him back into the service of Florence. He hopes, in short, that this book will be his ticket home. Lorenzo never responds, or if he does, history has not preserved his response. Machiavelli remains at his farm, waiting. Here is what most people who have heard of Machiavelli don't know. He also wrote one of the funniest plays in the history of Italian theatre, La Mandragola. The Mandrake Route is a comedy written sometime around 1518 during Machiavelli's exile years, and it is absolutely scandalous. The plot involves a young man's attempt to seduce a virtuous married woman through an absurdly elaborate scheme involving a fake physician, a faked miraculous route, a willing friar, and the woman's own credulous and foolish husband. Every character in it is either a schemer, a dupe, or both. The church is satirized mercilessly. The play is full of dirty jokes. And it is, underneath its bawdiness, a very sharp piece of social observation about the gap between the way people present themselves and the way they actually behave, which is, when you think about it, exactly the same theme as The Prince. The play was performed and celebrated in Florence. Even the Medicis enjoyed it. It is still performed today and still gets laughs. This is not nothing. He also wrote discourses on the first decade of Titus Livius, a much longer book than The Prince, and in many ways his more important and more fully developed work. The discourses take Livy's history of the Roman Republic as their jumping-off point and use it to develop an extended argument about republican government, about why republics tend to be stronger and more durable than principalities, about the importance of civic virtue, about the conditions under which a free people can govern themselves well. If The Prince is the book that made him infamous, The Discourses is the book that contains his deepest convictions. Because Machiavelli, whatever his reputation, was not a monarchist. He was a republican. He believed in self-government. He believed that a city of engaged, active, politically educated citizens was more resilient, more creative, and more genuinely strong than any principality, however brilliantly run. He was writing about republican values at a time when Florence had just lost its republic, and The Discourses has the feeling of a man keeping a faith alive in difficult circumstances. He also wrote The Art of War, a dialogue on military affairs that would influence military thinking for centuries. He wrote a history of Florence, commissioned eventually by the Medici themselves, the irony of which was surely not lost on him. He wrote poems. He wrote more plays. He was, in the deepest sense, a writer, someone for whom the putting of words on paper was not a means to an end, but a mode of being. All of this, remember, from a farm 7 miles south of Florence, produced in the hours between card games with a miller and a butcher, and the long, empty evenings of a man who has been expelled from the work he was born to do. Let the story slow down now. Let yourself sink a little deeper into wherever you are resting. The night is moving past its midpoint. The fire, if there is a fire, is burning lower. The sounds of the world outside are distant and dreamlike. Machiavelli waits. He waits for years. He corresponds furiously with Vettori and others. He makes observations. He writes analyses of current political events that are as sharp as anything he produced in his official capacity. He is, in exile, still completely himself, still watching, still thinking, still trying to understand. He simply has no official standing to make his understanding useful to anyone. The letters to Vettori are among the treasures of this period, and I want to spend a moment with them because they give us Machiavelli in a way that no other source does. Vettori is in Rome, serving as Florence's ambassador to the papal court. He is well connected, politically active, living at the center of the world that Machiavelli has been removed from. And yet the two men write to each other with an easy, fond, entirely unguarded intimacy that is rare between ambitious men of any age. Machiavelli writes to Vettori about women. He writes about the card games at the inn. He writes long, brilliant, sometimes despairing analyses of Italian politics that make clear, page after page, that his understanding of what is happening has not dimmed in the slightest, that if anything, the enforced distance of exile has sharpened his perspective, the way you sometimes see a painting better when you step back from it. He writes about the comic disasters of his daily life with a self-deprecating humor that is clearly genuine and not at all performative. He writes, in short, like a person talking to his friend. But underneath all of it, in almost every letter, there is the pulse of a question he cannot stop asking. Is there anything? Is there a way back? Is there anything he can do to restore himself to the work he was made for? The answer for years is no, or not quite, or perhaps, maybe, if you wait. He tries several times to attract the attention of the Medici government. He submits reports on the political situation, unsolicited analyses of current affairs that demonstrate, on every page, that here is a man of extraordinary political intelligence being wasted in the Tuscan countryside. He presents the history of Florence, eventually, directly to the Medici Pope. He is occasionally noticed, occasionally given a small task, occasionally paid a modest sum for a piece of work. He is sent on minor missions, a trip here, an investigation there. Each of these tiny missions he takes up with the full intensity of a man who has been waiting too long in the dark and cannot quite believe the light has come on, even dimly. But he is never fully restored. He is too associated with the old Republican government. He is too known as a man of his own opinions. He is, in the final analysis, too much himself, too unwilling or unable to perform the uncritical deference that powerful patrons have always required of the men who serve them. He cannot stop noticing things. He cannot stop saying what he notices. This is his greatest gift, and in the political world, his perpetual liability. There is a sadness to this period that I want you to feel without letting it become heavy. It is the particular sadness of a person who knows exactly what they have to offer and is unable to find anyone who wants it. A person who can see the problems clearly and knows how to address them and is not asked. It is the sadness of a mind running at full capacity with nowhere to go. It is, if you have ever experienced anything like it, a very familiar sadness. Machiavelli handles this, as far as we can tell from the historical record, with considerable grace and not a little darkness. He is not always cheerful. He is not always even dignified. There is one letter that describes a fairly spectacular episode of self-pity that he clearly regretted almost immediately. But he is always honest, at least with himself and with his friends. He does not pretend to be fine when he is not. He does not perform a stoic cheerfulness he does not feel. He is sad. And he says he is sad. And then he makes a joke about the miller's wife and gets back to his analysis of why the latest French king's Italian policy is doomed to fail. There are happy interludes. The Mandrake Route, when it is finally performed, is a genuine triumph. One of those evenings in the theatre that becomes legendary in the city's cultural memory. People remember it. They quote it. Lorenzo de' Medici reportedly enjoys it very much, which is probably one of the more complicated compliments Machiavelli ever received. He gathers with friends in the Oricellari Gardens, a semi-regular gathering of Florentine humanists who meet under the patronage of Bernardo Rucellai's heirs to discuss ideas and history and politics in exactly the kind of engaged, thoughtful way that Machiavelli has always loved. He is brilliant in these gatherings. He is himself. Younger men sit near him and hang on his observations and ask him to explain how he sees what he sees. He has, in other words, a reputation. He is known. People of intelligence and seriousness seek him out. He is not forgotten, not irrelevant. He is respected, even revered, in the intellectual world of Florentine humanism. But intellectual respect in a garden is not the same as political restoration, and he knows it, and it is not quite enough. He continues to refine his ideas. The discourses develop over years into a book of genuine size and ambition. The Art of War is written and circulated and read. It will influence military thinking across Europe for decades. The history of Florence is begun. A long, careful, deeply researched account that Machiavelli approaches with the same unflinching honesty he brought to everything else, refusing to flatter the Medici even while being paid by them to write their family history, which requires a certain kind of courage. He is building, still building, the extraordinary body of work that will eventually outlast everything else about this period, the Medici, the Republic, the whole crackling, brilliant, unstable world of Renaissance Florence. He is in his 50s now. His hair has gone, or mostly gone. His health is not what it was. The years of hard work and harder disappointment have left their marks on his body in the way they always do. The slight stoop, the eyes that tire more easily than they once did, the joints that protest the cold mornings in a way they never used to. But the mind is still turning. The mind, if anything, has never been sharper. Exile and disappointment, that great grinding combination, have done what they always do to a certain kind of person. They have deepened him, made him wiser, made him sadder in the way that wisdom always brings sadness, because wisdom means seeing things clearly. And the world, seen clearly, contains a great deal that is genuinely lamentable. He is still watching. He is still thinking. He is still in the evenings. putting on his courtly clothes and sitting down with the ancient dead and asking them to help him understand. And then, as if history has decided to offer one final, devastating joke, everything changes. And now we must return to where we began. In 1527, the world of Italian politics, already in permanent upheaval, shudders with the force of a new catastrophe. Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, whose Spanish and German troops have been fighting across Italy for years, unleashes a force on Rome that is simply beyond ordinary description. The sack of Rome. May 1527. Imperial troops, many of them unpaid, many of them German Lutherans who have no reverence for the papacy at all, pour into the holy city, and for weeks subject it to horrors that shock even the brutalized sensibility of the age. The Pope flees. The Vatican is looted. Priests are murdered. Nuns are violated. The whole burning, screaming, incomprehensible disaster plays out over the course of weeks in what is supposed to be the most sacred city in Christendom. And in Florence, the shock of the sack of Rome destabilizes the Medici's position. Clement VII, the Medici Pope, is suddenly a prisoner and a figure of ridicule rather than a source of power and protection. The Florentines, who have been growing restless under Medici rule, see their opportunity. There is a popular uprising. The Medici are expelled. The Republic is restored. Machiavelli has been waiting for this moment for 15 years. He has been writing about republican government for 15 years. He has been, despite everything, deeply and fundamentally committed to the idea of Florence governing itself through its own citizens' will. And now, at last, the thing he wanted is happening. He applies for his old position. He applies to be secretary again, to take up the work that was torn from him in 1512. He is rejected. The irony is almost unbearable. The new Republican government, distrustful of anyone who had worked in any capacity under the Medici, even someone who had been a lifelong Republican, even someone who had been tortured for refusing to betray the Republic, does not want him. He is too associated with the old order, with all orders. He is too complicated. He is at 58 not the man who will be given the position. He is devastated. His friends can see it. Whatever reserves of philosophical acceptance he has been drawing on for 15 years finally run out. He becomes ill very quickly after the rejection. Whether the illness was already in him and the devastation simply pushed it forward, or whether the despair itself broke down his physical resistance, we cannot know. He dies on June 21st, 1527. His friends are gathered. His family is near. He is given last rites, which perhaps surprises some people who have read The Prince and assumed he was a godless man. He was complicated about religion, as he was complicated about everything. He practiced the forms. Whether he believed the substance, only he knew. And then, he is gone. The man who saw more clearly than almost anyone alive into the mechanics of power, who spent his life in devoted service to a republic that didn't want him in the end, who wrote in candlelit rooms about how the world actually works, is gone. He is buried in the church of Santa Croce in Florence, alongside Galileo and Michelangelo and Dante. That is the company he keeps in death, which would have pleased him enormously. Let the night hold you now. We are near the end of our journey. And the stars, if there are stars where you are very bright and very still. The irony of Machiavelli's legacy is that it is both more and less than he intended. He wanted to be useful to Florence. He wanted to help his republic govern itself wisely. He wanted to be read, yes, but not as an abstraction, as a practical guide for practical men in practical situations. Instead, he became something much stranger. A symbol, a name, an adjective, Machiavellian. The word entered the language almost immediately and has never left it, carrying connotations of manipulation and cynicism and political ruthlessness that he himself would have found both flattering and unfair. Because Machiavelli was not, at heart, a cynic. A realist, yes. Profoundly and sometimes painfully so. A man who looked at the world without the comfortable blur of wishful thinking, who saw human nature as it is, rather than as we might prefer it to be, but not a cynic. He cared too much. He cared about Florence too much, cared about the Republic too much, cared about the question of how human beings might live together well too much to be a cynic. What he gave the world ultimately was permission. Permission to think about politics honestly. Permission to ask not just what ought to happen, but what does happen, and why, and what might actually be done about it. He separated political analysis from moral preachment in a way that was deeply uncomfortable and deeply necessary. He said, "Let us look at things as they are. Let us understand the mechanics before we judge them. Let us be clear-eyed before we are righteous." This approach is now so commonplace in political science, in strategic thinking, in the study of international relations, that it is almost invisible. We take it for granted that politics operates according to its own logic, which is not identical to personal morality. We take for granted that power has its own rules, that the question of effectiveness is separate from the question of goodness. These are Machiavellian insights, and they have so thoroughly colonized modern thought that we rarely notice we are thinking in his terms. He was also, in ways that have been somewhat obscured by his reputation, a genuine lover of freedom. The discourses on Livy, his most sustained argument for the value of republican self-government, is a hymn to civic life, to the energy and creativity that are released when people govern themselves, to the deeper strength of a polity in which citizens have a genuine stake. He believed, and argued with great passion, that free people are more innovative, more militarily effective, and ultimately more durable than subjects of any prince, however virtuous. This is not the belief of a man who thought power mattered above everything. It is the belief of a man who thought that freedom, properly understood and properly defended, is the greatest political good. There is also the question of his influence on the idea of the modern state itself, because one of the things Machiavelli did, almost by accident, was invent a new way of thinking about the political unit we now call the state. Before Machiavelli, the standard way of thinking about political order was to imagine it as embedded in a larger divine order, the kingdom of God, the natural hierarchy of creation, the authority of the Church as the supreme mediating institution between human beings and divine will. Politics was always, in this view, subordinate to theology. The prince ruled by divine right. The Church was, in some fundamental sense, above the prince. Machiavelli essentially ignores all of this. He treats the political unit, the city-state, the principality, the republic, as something that operates according to its own internal logic, governed by its own laws, answerable ultimately to its own survival and prosperity rather than to a divine blueprint. He talks about the state as if it were a human artifact, created by human beings for human purposes, and subject to the same kind of rational analysis as any other human artifact. This is not atheism exactly, and it is not irreligion exactly. Machiavelli is complicated about religion, and the church appears in his work in several different lights. But it is the beginning of a secular way of thinking about politics that will, over the next few centuries, become the dominant mode of political analysis in the Western world. He was not alone in this, of course. Others were moving in similar directions, but he moved further, faster, more directly than almost anyone else, and he did it in prose of such clarity and force that it could not be argued with or misunderstood. This is the thing about Machiavelli's style. It has no comfortable ambiguities to hide behind. He says exactly what he means. This is admirable and, for a man navigating the political world of the 16th century, somewhat reckless. The prince was placed on the Index of Forbidden Books by the Catholic Church in 1559, 32 years after his death, which is one measure of how seriously his ideas were being taken. His books have never gone out of print. The Prince has been translated into every major language on earth. It has been read by Napoleon, who annotated his copy heavily, by Lincoln, who cited it approvingly in at least one context, by Elizabeth I, who is said to have kept it close at hand, by every kind of leader imaginable across 5 centuries. It has been praised and condemned, misunderstood and overread, used to justify cruelty and used to expose it. Thomas Cromwell had a copy. Cardinal Richelieu had a copy. Frederick the Great of Prussia wrote an entire book refuting it, which tells you everything about how much it had gotten under his skin. He is read in universities today, not just in history and politics departments, but in business schools, in strategic studies programs, in philosophy seminars. The questions he asked have not stopped being asked. How does power work? What makes leadership effective? When is the use of force justified? What is the relationship between morality and effectiveness? These are still live questions, still contested, still not answered. Which means that the conversation he started in that small farmhouse outside Florence, by lamplight, in the evenings between card games with the miller and the butcher, is still going on. Not bad, for a man who wrote it to try to get his old government job back. Let us return now to where we began, to that small room south of Florence, to the summer of 1527, and the lamp burning low, and the sounds of the city drifting through the night air. Machiavelli is lying in his bed. He is 58 years old, and he is dying, and the republic he loved his whole life has been restored, and he has not been asked to serve it. And the particular age of that rejection is very near him now. But something else is also near him. He has written things that will last. He may not know quite how long they will last. No one does in the moment of writing. But he knows they are good. He knows they are true. He knows they say something about the way the world works that needed saying, that nobody had said quite so clearly before, that people will argue about for a very long time. He has loved this city his whole life. This impossible, brilliant, maddening, beautiful city. And even now, even in the last hours, the sound of it is not unwelcome. It is the sound of human life, continuing, of the eternal slightly chaotic business of people trying to figure out how to live together. He spent his life studying that business. He was never bored by it. Not for a day, not for an hour. He has children. He has Marietta. He has Guicciardini, who will grieve him truly, and a circle of friends who thought of him as one of the most interesting people they had ever known. He has his joke about paradise. He is ready to go argue with Plato. The lamp flickers. The city murmurs. The hills around Florence are dark and very still. The cypress trees move slightly in a warm wind from the south. Niccolò Machiavelli closes his eyes. And somewhere in the silence that follows, in the centuries that unspool from this quiet room, in every library and seminar and council chamber and campaign headquarters where someone opens a copy of The Prince and begins to read, he lives on, sharp, irreverent, honest, wrong sometimes and right about the things that matter. A man who never stopped watching and never stopped trying to understand. Sleep well now. The world's great statesmen and thinkers are all around you in the dark, at their ancient desks, in their ancient courts, still arguing, still reading, still asking the questions that have no final answers. And you are here, very still, very quiet, in the good company of all the people who have rested at the end of a long day and let the world's great stories carry them gently under. Good night.